Perhaps one of the most unusual electric trains in Great Britain is the Class 325, a unit that carries parcels rather than passengers. We've had these things in Train Simulator for many years now, and I got the idea to make this review after recording a scene for my Class 303 video, which featured a cameo from a Class 325. The Class 303 video was published in November 2023, but for various reasons, it's taken the better part of 2 years for the 325 review to come to fruition. For reference, the Class 325s were built in 1995 and 1996 by ABB Transportation at Derby Litchurch Lane Works. The main body shell and traction equipment is derived from the Class 319 of 1988, but for whatever reason, the 325s were fitted with networker-style cabs. In any case, the 325s are dual voltage units, which means they can run on either 25 kV AC overhead wires or 750 volt DC third rail systems, but for the longest time they have run exclusively under the wires. From what I gather, the inclusion of third rail pickups was to enable the trains to run on the southern region to the planned mail depot at Tunbridge. For the longest time, these units were used to transport Royal Mail parcels up and down the West and East Coast main lines to and from the large mail terminal in Willesden, North London. Another Royal Mail depot that they often visited was Shieldmuir, near Glasgow, Scotland, which you can visit in Train Simulator as part of Keith Ross's West Coast Main Line North route. One of these units, number 325010, was scrapped for spare parts in 2012. Sadly, the rest of the Class 325s were withdrawn from service in September 2024, just under 3 weeks earlier than planned, and 9 units have already been scrapped. Apparently, Veramus Rail owns the remaining 6 units, but I don't know if they're actually back in service or not. In any case, I only recognise the name Veramus because of the Class 321 units that now run in mail service. The original Class 325 pack was made by Dovetail Games and released in August 2012, but back then, they were still called railsimulator.com, or RSC for short. You can still buy the 325 on Steam as of early October 2025, but she costs 24 New Zealand dollars. In my opinion, that's too much to pay for an add-on this small. The default pack only includes one livery, and the branding says Mail Express as opposed to Royal Mail, presumably due to licensing restrictions. The default Class 325 comes with at least 3 scenarios for the aforementioned WCML North route. One of them sees you drive a trio of 325s from Carlisle to Shieldmuir Royal Mail Terminal in the dark, and that was one of my favourite scenarios back in the day. I also like the use of roller shutter doors and the unusual interior. Unusual by EMU standards at least. But due to the way this game is set up, when you're making a scenario with the Class 325, you'll have to use the Pick Up Passengers option for stops at Shieldmuir RMT or a passenger station, and the platform at the mail depot is set up to act like a normal passenger platform. There are a few aspects of the default Class 325 that I don't particularly like. For starters, the horn, and some audio for the cab controls, is recycled from the Kuju era Class 166. There's also the absence of a passenger view, although I suppose this is understandable given the lack of windows anywhere on these units, except the cab of course, and I always thought that the train accelerated too slowly with her default physics. As for the 325's model, I think it has aged well enough, but I've never been a fan of the default textures. In March 2021, Armstrong Powerhouse came along and released an Enhancement Pack for the Class 325. It replaced an old sound pack they used to have on their website, which was compatible with the 319 and 325, although the sound pack had already been discontinued for a fair while before the 325 EP's release. Dovetail's old 319 model, which was released on Steam in March 2014, has been largely obsolete since 2018, when Richmond Power Sausage first released their own Class 319 model. In my opinion, it's light years ahead of the DTG version in every aspect, but the trouble with AP's 319 pack is that it's quite expensive and split into 2 volumes, for whatever reason. As I have come to expect from overcharged powerbank products released over the last 5 years, the Class 325 Enhancement Pack is pretty expensive for what it is. In this case, the pack costs £12, or around $24.85 NZD, at full price, and I would argue that that presents poor value for money, considering the fact that it's actually a little bit more expensive than the base requirement. In any case, the 325 EP only includes 2 liveries, one of them being a much better rendition of the original Royal Mail livery, and the other being the revised Royal Mail livery. As for features on the 325 EP, these include, but are not limited to, neutral section functionality, an arcing pantograph in colder conditions, wheel slip protection, dual voltage functionality, varying traction motor volume, and 3D nameplates for units 325002, 325006, and 325008. The cab side windows do not open, although this is a limitation of the original model. For whatever reason, AP also gave players the option to do driver-only operation on the 325, even though, according to the manual, the platform staff are the ones in charge of the doors in real life. Or at least, they were until Royal Mail made the questionable decision to retire the 325s. Here's a thought. If AP could do 3D nameplates for the Class 325, why was the same luxury not afforded to more recent enhancement packs for the Class 378 and Class 92? As far as I can tell, the Class 325's sound set is mostly, if not entirely, reused from the Class 319. I would argue that AP reusing sounds isn't necessarily a bad thing this time because A, the 325's were derived from the 319's, and B, these are still good quality sounds, although, in saying that, I can't help thinking that the motors are too quiet. Lastly, the Class 325 EP includes 3 scenarios for the East Coast Main Line London to Peterborough route. Said scenarios take place in 2000, 2003 and 2013, complete with realistic motive power for their respective time periods as the AI traffic, but the total cost for all the required add-ons is a ludicrous £310 and 65 pence, or roughly $698.40 NZD. However, the add-ons mentioned on AP's 325 EP listing are not essential if you don't want to run the included scenarios. If you know how to use the scenario editor, you can just run the 325 in your own standard or free roam scenarios that don't need stupidly busy AI traffic. The other option is a quick drive scenario, although I don't bother with those myself. As I've said in a previous video, specifically the one about the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway 7F, I prefer to run whatever motive power on whatever route I like, regardless of whether or not it makes sense. As is usually the case with Armstrong Underpants products these days, I don't think the Class 325 Enhancement Pack is worth the full price, but I still recommend trying out this EP if you can pick it up on a reasonable discount. This train is borderline subpar in her default state, and the EP does its job reasonably well, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that this is the greatest Armstation Land Rover pack of all time. That honour would probably go to something like the Class 411 or Class 37. If I were to rate the Class 325 EP somewhere between 1 and 10, I think I would give it a 7. And for anyone who stuck around to the end of the video, you win a specific type of power tool that can also be taken as medication. It's the Benadryl.